there were times that I felt annoyed at Xander for even suggesting that we go to therapy.
Yeah.
Like, and again, it's like, even with my belief in therapy, even as a therapist myself, there was that little voice in the back of my head where I would hear Xander say, like, can we go to therapy to get help with this? And it would just sound like an insult to me. Hello and welcome to the Pillow Talks podcast. We're your hosts, Vanessa
and Xander Marin.
I'm a sex therapist with over 20 years of experience.
And I'm just a regular dude. We share the ups and downs in our relationship while giving you step-by-step techniques for improving yours.
Make sure you subscribe for your weekly double date full of totally doable sex tips, practical relationship advice, hilarious and honest stories of what really goes on behind closed bedroom doors, and so much more. It's the sex education you wish you'd had. Thanks to Dipsea for supporting Pillow Talks. Get an extended 30-day free trial when you go to dipseastories.com/pillow. And thanks to Babbel for supporting our show. Babbel's 10-minute lessons make it the perfect way to really learn a new language on the go. Here's a special limited time deal for our listeners to get you started right now. Get 55% off your Babbel subscription, but only for our listeners at babbel.com/pillow. Surprise! We are back in couples therapy.
Damn! Couples therapist and husband in couples therapy.
We sure are.
Who would have thunk it?
Yeah, we're doing a very different kind of episode today. We have been in couples therapy for the last few weeks, and we thought, you know what? I think we want to share this information with our friends.
Yeah.
And talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fun. It's nice to get to share a little snippet of our life every now and then on the podcast. I know we talk just randomly about things that are going on, but in not that much detail. So it's nice to check in every now and then.
Yeah, so we're going to be going there in this episode. We're going to talk about why we're in therapy, how we found a therapist, how it's going, and how to ask your partner to go to therapy with you.
Yeah, because I mean, that's an important consideration. I think that's a thing that stops a lot of people from going to therapy, is that worry of like, oh my God, how could I possibly ask my partner to do this? And hey, you know, it wasn't like this easy slam dunk situation for us to even get into therapy. Like, it's something that we all struggle with.
We'll tell you all about it in just a second.
We will. But first, we got to get into our review of the week. Absolutely love this podcast. I originally heard Vanessa on We Can Do Hard Things, and when I found out she had her own podcast, I got very excited. In past relationships, I've never been comfortable talking about not just sex, but other topics in a relationship. I started this podcast in the summer as I was getting into a new relationship. I told my now boyfriend about the podcast, and I've sent him a couple of episodes that sparked my interest too, which also started great conversations between us. I then purchased their book and immediately loved it. I'm not much of a reader either. And we even discussed topics based out of that too. I am now getting more comfortable communicating in my relationship and increasing my interest on sex thanks to Vanessa and Xander. I definitely recommend their podcast and book. You definitely won't regret it.
Oh, thank you so much for this wonderful review. Reviews are the best way for Pillow Talks to grow. So if you are willing to help us reach more people, we would be so grateful if you took 60 seconds to leave a review. And we do a giveaway every week as our way of saying thank you. So here's how it works. Go to the main Pillow Talks page on Apple Podcasts, scroll to the bottom, and you'll see the review section there. Leave a review, and you are automatically entered into the giveaway every single week going forward. So if you hear your review read in an episode, email us at info@vmtherapy.com and you will get to choose your prize. Okay, so let's get into it.
Yeah, how the heck did we get here?
Let's start off by talking, why are we in couples therapy? And I guess I'll also back this up a bit to say that this is not our first experience in couples therapy.
No.
We did some couples therapy back in the beginning of our relationship. We talk about it a little bit in our book, Sex Talks, the 5 conversations that will transform your love life. We were, just struggling with mismatched sex drives, with the spark fading in our relationship, really, not knowing what to do. Like, despite me being a sex therapist and, part of this field, feeling like I didn't have any practical tools.
Yeah, and I think us butting heads a lot around that and just feeling like we were going around in circles. Honestly, like kind of the same old argument over and over didn't feel like we were getting anywhere other than both of us feeling burnt out about that.
Yeah. So it's not our first time in therapy.
Yeah, I mean, we've been to like sessions here or there since then as well. And yeah, we've been in couples therapy a couple of times. We've seen a couple different couples therapists.
Wow, how many times can you say couple in one sentence?
A couple couples.
So this time around, we have a very specific logistical question within our business that we wanted support on. So it's basically
sort of
like
intersection of business and personal, right?
Yeah, it's kind of this like, should we do this thing? And if so, how would we do it? And what might the impacts of doing it be? So this was something that we have talked about on our own a lot. Like, we've had a lot of conversations about it, kind of gone back and forth a little bit. But both of us got to the point where we were just feeling like we wanted some support, like somebody to help us, guide us through these conversations and make this decision.
Yeah, it would be helpful to have some help.
So I want to be really honest about our journey to starting it, though. Xander was the first one to suggest that we go to therapy, and I did not want to go.
Yeah, she didn't.
I really didn't want to go.
It's true. And I guess that kind of like, I don't know, maybe breaks the typical gender stereotype, or probably is, the opposite experience of probably many people in our community listening.
Well, and also just because I am a therapist, you would think like the therapist would be the one who wants to go to therapy, and the non-therapist partner would be like, I don't know, like, can't you just keep that at your job and like that not have to involve us? So I want to be really vulnerable and honest and share why I didn't want to go. So there are a lot of different layers and pieces of it here. The first one is that despite being a therapist myself and believing so deeply in therapy, like I really and truly believe everybody should do therapy at least once in their lives. I think the world would be a much better place if we all did therapy.
Yeah,
like
probably more than once in your life.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm saying at least once. I think that therapy is an incredibly valuable resource, and I'm really glad to see attitudes towards therapy changing so much. Like Gen Z has much better attitudes about therapy than our millennial generation or any generation before that to come. Like now, Gen Zers think it's an attractive thing if somebody says that they are in therapy, like even on their dating profile or on their like first date or something like that. But anyways, I'm a therapist. I believe in it very deeply. And I've also had a lot of really negative and painful experiences personally with therapy. And it's been really hard for me to navigate like this thing that I believe in so much and do, as a therapist versus what my experiences have been as a client. I've had just one therapist who just straight up was not a good therapist, like very basic things like forgetting my name, forgetting details of my story.
Yeah, like asking you to retell things. And it's like, wait, like we spent a whole session talking about this.
Yeah, like in pretty egregious ways. And then I had experiences with two other therapists that I worked with each of those therapists for a very long time, like multiple years. And ended up, I don't want to like go into all of the details of what happened, but basically like with both of those therapists, they ended up hurting the therapeutic relationship and my feelings also in some like pretty profound ways. And I think like as a therapist, as a therapist myself, I can kind of take myself out of the client seat and say like, that was a very inappropriate thing for you to do. Mm-hmm. Nothing like illegal or anything like that, but just like, yeah, it was hurtful to me, like ways that they didn't quite recognize my feelings in the experience, I think. And that was, again, just like a really, really painful experience to have to grapple with. And I don't want anybody listening to this to get scared, to think like, oh my God, like what kind of stuff happens in therapy? I don't want to go. Like there's already so much stigma against therapy and so many nerves and fears about it. So I'm not saying this to fearmonger and say like, you got to be careful. Like the vast majority of people have really positive experiences in therapy. I'm just trying to share to like give the context of why I was feeling so resistant. So like the last time that I ended therapy was a couple of years ago, and my heart still hurts. Like my heart, still like really hurts about that experience. And so it's just been the idea of starting it up again, while I've had like my own curiosities about exploring things in personal therapy, like things that I would have loved to explore with you, has been this feeling of like, I don't want to get my heart hurt again. I mean, it's very similar to dating in a certain sense, you know, like you get your heart broken and there's that fear of like, I don't want to put myself out there and get hurt again.
Yeah, you've been jilted.
So that has been a big piece of it. Another big piece that came up for me is feeling like we could solve it on our own. Like the question that we're grappling with, it's pretty straightforward. Like, yes, there are layers to it. There are, you know, things to talk about. But yeah, this sort of almost, I wouldn't say it was pride, but just this feeling of like, it's so straightforward. Like, we can just talk about it ourselves. And also I have a lot of confidence in our communication.
Yeah.
You know, you and I have worked on our communication a lot. We're able to talk about really tough things. We've worked through like tough issues before. And so we've had so many conversations about this that I sort of had this feeling of like, yeah, we can keep doing this ourselves. We don't need to bring anybody else in. We don't need therapy. That's what I think is like the big thing that comes up for so many people.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what you just described is one of the major blockages that most people have who don't get into therapy. It's one or both partners being like, well, hold on, we should be able to solve this ourselves, or I think we can, or oh, well, okay, well, we've had like 4 bad conversations about this and 2 okay conversations about this, so like, if we could just get the odds a little bit back in the better conversations' favor, then like we'll be okay. And yeah, but I think this just gets at such, I mean, I'm curious, you know, if people in other countries relate with this. I think this is such like a societal thing for Americans. It's like extreme self-reliance. I mean, that's kind of like part of the fabric of American society, from sort of like the push west frontier times, even like the concept of like, you know, how people came to, you know, America, white people came to America from Europe, this sort of like self-reliance, we're going to do it ourselves kind of thing. And that's just so deep in the way that we are raised. I think that's one of the huge things that gets in the way of people going to therapy. It's just like, well, I shouldn't need that. I should be able to figure it out on my own. And somehow, if I'm able to figure it out on my own, it's worth more. Yeah. Even though the outcome is exactly the same. Actually, the outcome is worse when you do it on your own because you are getting 1 out of 1 viewpoint. Your viewpoint is not being challenged. Like nobody else is being like, oh, well, have you considered this perspective? Have you considered that perspective? Yeah. And especially a therapist who's seen tons of people probably for similar things, it can be like, well, here's my perspective. And like, here's what I've seen like 10 other ways of looking at this. And when you do something all yourself, like you're just relying on you and you are only one perspective. So it's not better.
But I think that there's also like, as a therapist myself, that actually contributed to the feeling where it's like, I know the sorts of questions that a therapist would ask us, and I know how we need to like express our thoughts and feelings about it. So in a weird sort of way, it was like, I don't need anybody. Like I know the therapy things.
Kind of like a doctor is like, oh, well, why would I go see another doctor? I can diagnose what's going on. Like, you know, I don't know if doctors are allowed to prescribe stuff for themselves. Probably not. But like, I know what's wrong with me. I can just get another doctor to prescribe me the medication I need. And like, that's all. I don't need them telling me, you know, what I already know.
Okay, another thing that came up for me, I just want to be really honest about this too. Like, despite this being a pretty practical issue on the surface, I also knew, like, there are layers here.
Yeah.
You know, especially, again, as a therapist, it's like people come in and they oftentimes have these very, you know, practical things that they're wanting to talk about.
The presenting issue. There's a word for this, people. Like, you call it a presenting issue. It's what they present you with. And it's called a presenting issue because very often the real issue is not the presenting issue.
It's never the thing. The thing that couples think they're fighting about, it's never the thing. So I knew, it's like, yes, I can say to myself, it's a straightforward thing, but like there are layers, stuff's going to come up. And to be totally honest, like I didn't really want to do that work. It just felt like it's going to be hard. It's going to take effort. Like I have a lot of other things going on in my life. Things are good between the two of us. Like it also wasn't causing enough pain.
Yeah.
To feel worth it. And I think that's another trap that we fall into. And we'll come back to this theme a little bit later. But I think so many people, we wait until things feel really bad. And then it's like, okay, fine, now I'll get some help. Whether that's mental help, physical help, like emotional, anything like that. Like we wait until the pain is super bad.
Yeah, or in the given moment, you're like, oh, well, this isn't that bad. It's like, okay, we got in a fight about it a couple weeks ago, but things are stable now. It's not that bad. I can deal with this. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I also, getting back to what you're saying about, you knew that deeper things would probably come up. I also knew that there were probably deeper things that would come up. And, and that was one of the reasons why I wanted to go to therapy. Was I had a pretty good idea that, yeah, this is sort of on the surface, like a logistical type of thing. But, the reason why it is a logistical issue is probably because there's some deeper things that are going to come up. And, it'd be nice for those to come up in a more controlled environment, with the support of someone that can kind of help gently guide us through it.
I will also say therapy is a fucking hassle. Like even
Says
on
the
my
therapist.
best days when I love it, like therapy is a hassle.
Yeah,
It's expensive. It's time consuming. All the steps of it, like finding a therapist, you have to make sure that you like that therapist and they like resonate with you. It's a good fit. You have to make sure their schedule works with yours. You have to get to and from appointments. You also have to do the appointments themselves, like that time. You have to spend time like getting a therapist up to speed to understand what the story is. Like you're not doing one single session to like fix the thing. And of course, like spending the time actually resolving the issue and getting to a point where you feel like, okay, we've done the thing, we're ready to take a break or to stop for now or whatever it is. Like it's a hassle. Therapy is a really big hassle. And I do think it's important that we acknowledge the challenge of it. Like it's not an easy thing. And also there are a lot of other logistical things that come up for other people. Like a lot of people live in places where there aren't therapists or there isn't a therapist that specializes in the thing that you need help with. Or maybe
you have to drive like 40 miles or something or drive, 2 hours. Like that's a huge barrier to entry.
Yeah. So even, we're very lucky to live in a place where there were tons of therapists and people had availability, but it's really hard for a lot of people.
Oh yeah. And I mean, like I remember back like during the middle of the pandemic, like it was nearly impossible to find therapists. Therapists were so busy because so many people were having mental health struggles and just all kinds of struggles. And, fortunately, I guess we're in a time now where it's a bit easier to find a therapist. But yeah, it's like, who knows, based on what's going on in the world, everyone might be busy.
The expense issue is really interesting too, like being on either side of it myself. Like I think that the vast majority of therapists are dramatically undercharging for their services. Being a therapist is fucking hard. You have to be so present every single moment of the session. Like most jobs, I think you don't have to be super present for most of it. Or like you're kind of like you're doing mindless things or you can check in and out here or there.
Yeah, your focus can kind of wax and wane.
When you're a therapist, you have to be laser focused the entire time. 50 minutes or an hour and 20 minutes, depending on how you do your sessions. Like you have to be there, fully present, fully paying attention. And that's hard.
Yeah, and you're face to face with the person who's talking to you. So there's no phoning it in.
No, you cannot phone it in. It's so obvious if you are. Plus, like all the training that we have to go through, like years and years of school, years and years of working for free or really low cost, the cost of school itself, like it's a lot. And therapists can't work 40 hours. Like most therapists, if you have 20 clients a week, that's a pretty full load. Like most therapists would not go 30 clients or above. Like that's nuts. Just the amount of
that level of focus.
Yeah, and being able to remember everybody's details too.
Oh God, yeah.
Like, imagine
I would struggle so hard with that.
20 different people, like that's so much.
Yeah, and like the intimate details of their life, and like, yeah, I mean, just I can imagine how easy it would be to just mix up like one little like your that
husband
story,
Roger
that story
your,
that client A told me 3 weeks ago. I'm seeing client B and I'm like, oh yeah, like when your sister blah blah blah, and it's like, oh shit, yeah, no.
Yeah. So it's like, I want therapists to charge more. I want them to be compensated fairly for all of that energy and time and effort. And also, like, they do an amazing job. Like, they really help people, like, change people's lives. And on the other hand, as a paying client, it's like, wow, therapy is so expensive and it's so inaccessible.
It adds up, like, session after session often.
I mean, we're paying almost $1,000 a month to do therapy. Like, we're in California, prices are a little bit higher. Obviously, they vary like all across the country. But in general, like, that's a pretty fair rate for couples therapy these days. And like $1,000 a month, that's not an insignificant amount of money.
Oh, no.
For the average person, like, that's completely undoable.
Yeah, that will completely break your budget.
Yeah, so I just need to do that little rant there because it's just tough. It's tough to like make something so accessible, but also make sure that people are being fairly compensated for a really tough job. So anyways, that's our experience right now. But going back to, Xander being the first one to suggest going to therapy, like, I also want to say there were times that I felt annoyed at Xander for even suggesting that we go to therapy.
Yeah.
Like, and again, it's like, even with my belief in therapy, even as a therapist myself, there was that little voice in the back of my head where I would hear Xander say, like, can we go to therapy to get help with this? And it would just sound like an insult to me.
Yeah. And I was being super careful because I knew, I know about this history. I know that it's a tricky subject because of, what your experiences have been. And, so yeah, it was me kind of tiptoeing around it for a while.
I think that just goes to show you how strong of a stigma there is against therapy, that even as a therapist, my gut reaction to can we go to therapy was like, this is an insult. This is a bad thing. It's like a sign that something's wrong with the relationship. Like that was the knee-jerk reaction. So my rational adult brain could kick in after that and say, like, this is not a bad thing. It's a great thing, actually, that he's asking. Like, it would be really helpful. But like that knee-jerk initial reaction was like, oh, no, I don't want to. So I wanted to share all of this because I can just really relate to other people out there who might be feeling very resistant to therapy, whether it's, that you really should be doing some individual therapy, but you just don't want to, or your partner's been asking you to go to couples therapy and you just don't want to. Like, I get it. And I wanted to share that to encourage people that, like, look, I was in that same position too. And I came around to the idea of it. And spoiler alert, I'm so fucking glad that we're doing it. We'll talk a little bit more about our experiences in a moment, but I'm really, really happy that we're doing it.
Me too.
So if you're feeling resistant to therapy, it is okay. It's understandable to be resistant. There are a lot of things that it makes perfect sense to be resistant about. And it is also worth it. It's absolutely worth it. So obviously, I did eventually come around to the idea of going to therapy.
You more than came around. You really impressed me, actually.
Thank you. Okay, so there were a bunch of different variables that came into play for me. The first one was that ultimately, like, I respected that you wanted to go. Like, you and I really take this perspective in our relationship that if something matters to you, it matters to me, and vice versa. And I think that's a really healthy perspective for all couples to take on. Like, if it matters to you, it matters to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I had, like I said, I had been tiptoeing around it a bit for a while. And I think what actually happened was you and we were like in a totally random argument about something totally different. And I think you used as an example, like you used as an example in the argument, like, oh, well, like, like, obviously, like, if you ever wanted to go to therapy, I would just instantly say yes. And I would expect the same from you. And I was like, oh, okay, like, I think I've kind of been asking for that for a little while. And you were like, oh, okay, let's do it.
Yeah, I mean, the way that you asked, it was very subtle at first. It was kind of like these little suggestions of like, maybe we should or we could or something like that.
And
so
looking
it was like,
back, that was probably not the best approach.
We'll talk at the end of the episode about like how to talk to your partner if you want to suggest going to therapy. But no, I mean, I think like it was a challenge for both of us because we never hit a huge pain point with it. It wasn't like, this is really bad. Like, I need us to go to therapy. So you were sort of like gently, we'd start talking about the thing and you'd gently say like, this could be something that like a therapist would be really helpful for. And I'd be like,
this could be.
Yeah, it could be.
Maybe.
But I was too much in that, like, we can do it. Like, we're already doing it. We're talking about it. Let's just keep doing it.
Yeah, like it could be good to talk and we could figure this out on our own.
Yeah. But eventually I did realize, I was like, it's not that we couldn't do it, but it did start to feel like we were running into some of our communication limitations. Like, one thing that comes up for us with communication is, it's kind of funny. Like, we've gotten so good at knowing all the rules for communicating that sometimes we get like a little overly therapy talky with it. And we can kind of like end up going in circles about things where it feels like we're not getting to any sort of resolution. And it can feel exhausting for both of us of like, okay, I heard that and da-da-da-da. Okay, I hear that and da-da-da. And it's just like, but we have a hard time stopping ourselves from communication. It's like we have a hard time saying like, okay, that's the end of the conversation. Let's stop there. Like there's always, some new thing that we end up talking about. So I think we both started to realize like, yeah, we're able to talk about this, but it's not our most effective communication. Like,
yeah, I mean, it's like, well, we could figure this out, but we could spend a year figuring this out on our own, or we could go get some help and maybe, get through this a little quicker and maybe learn some new things about each other in the process.
So like we were saying, Xander was doing a lot of like kind of gentle, like, oh, we could, or maybe we should kind of things. But I did feel like you also did a really good job of honoring and acknowledging my resistance. Like you said things like, I understand why you wouldn't want to, or like, it makes sense why you wouldn't want to. I know you've had those tough experiences. So I felt like I never felt like you were pushing me or pressuring me to do it.
Yeah, I never, it was tricky because it was something that I wanted to do. And at that point, I had a long time of coming to terms with the fact that it was something I wanted. It was something for a while I would be thinking about, I wonder if I wonder if maybe it would be valuable to get some help and, thinking about that more and more and like, okay, well, yeah, I think maybe we should. I'm like, okay, yeah, probably we should. I definitely think we should. But like Vanessa said, it was never like we were never in a bad place. Mm-hmm. We were never in a bad place. And I was never feeling like this is an ultimatum. Like we have to do this or it's going to be a real problem or like our marriage is going to end. It's like nowhere remotely close to that. So yeah, I mean, I guess it's just sort of like the and thing, the holding two things at once that we talk about a lot, where it's like, I could really hold like, yeah, this is something I could see some serious value. This is something that I would like to do, something that I want to do. Mm-hmm. And it's not a requirement. I have so much empathy for what she's going through. I have so much empathy for all the reasons why she would have resistance, why she might not want to go. Mm-hmm. And, I also, in a way kind of accepted like, yeah, there could be a world in which we don't do this. And, I can live with that.
Yeah. So you did eventually come out and like clearly say like, I want us to go.
Yes.
And that was important for me to hear. Like, to be totally honest, I knew that you wanted to go. The other times you were like, this might be nice too. But
why else would I be saying that?
The way that you were phrasing it, it sort of allowed me to kind of like squirrel my way out of it.
I feel like that's so interesting because that's something that we like the royal we, like all you listening, like this is something that we are all guilty of. Mm-hmm. I feel like so often, we hide requests or we hide needs in these statements that really leave them open for interpretation, or like where we're really unwilling to commit to something that we truly want. And I mean, I'm becoming more and more aware of this as I get older, as I get more mature, as I get more, I don't know, like retrospective, is that a word? I get more like circumspect. Like just like, yeah, the ways in which we kind of devalue our actual wants or our needs and put them in this, it might be nice to whatever. because like, I mean, think about how often you say, oh, like, wouldn't it be nice to blah, 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 or like, it might be nice to whatever. And like, be honest with yourself. What percentage of the time that you use that language, is it genuinely just like a curiosity, or like, I don't really care. Like, I'm totally curious. it doesn't matter to me which way, like whether we do or don't do this thing, versus the percentage of times that you say that and you're like, yeah, I really want this thing. I don't feel comfortable putting myself out there and saying, I want this. And I'm just going to put it out there vaguely, hoping that my partner will jump on it and say, oh yeah, we should do that. And then you're like, great, I got what I wanted without having to ask, even though I did kind of ask.
Yeah. So, I mean, once you said it very clearly like that, it was like, okay, like now it's a clear request. Like, it was a moment of clarity for me.
And I will also say, it felt really fucking good to finally just say it. Like, it doesn't, having been through this, in this situation for a while, it didn't feel good time after time, kind of like doing these subtle hints. And I was getting sick of that. And it felt so good to finally just be like, all right, I'm just going to say it. We get so in our heads about like, oh God, well, I'm really going to put myself out there. It's going to be so vulnerable. And yeah, it is vulnerable for that moment that you say it. And it's such a relief, like the moment it's out there. Like, and think about like anytime, I don't know, you've like had a secret to tell or something. It's like, seriously, it's just getting that shit out there.
Yeah.
You feel a million times better. So, hey, if anyone is listening to this and that resonates with you, if anyone's listening, if that resonates with you and you're holding something in, whether you want to go to therapy or not, like, let this be your sign to just like let it out. Yeah. All right. Boom, mic drop.
I will say the final thing that came up for me is I really kind of sat back with it and I realized, like, look, this decision, it's a big step for us personally and professionally. And in the end, like, having that end result mattered more to me than my resistance to going. So it was like, I want to be at that point where we've made the decision, we're taking the action. And that just, it felt more powerful than any of the other reasons I was coming up with for why I didn't want to go. So I think that's a really powerful exercise for other people too, is like, visualize yourself in that end state or having achieved that end goal or with that end experience. And like, does that visualization of yourself feel more powerful than any fears or anxieties or worries that might be coming up for you right now? Before we go any further, we want to tell you a little bit more about our sponsors because we love them and we love that they help us bring Pillow Talks to you absolutely for free. First up, we have Dipsea. Dipsea is an app full of hundreds of short, sexy audio stories designed by women for women. And I first found out about Dipsea actually from a client when I was working with people one-on-one in San Francisco. We were working with her about desire. Like, she was really struggling with feeling low desire. And she stumbled upon Dipsea one day and told me that she was absolutely shocked by how much desire it made her feel. Like, being able to put her headphones on, select a sexy story, hear a sexy voice reading that story like straight into her ears. It was so erotic and exciting to her. So, of course, I had to check it out, and I really, really loved it. They just really bring scenarios to life with these immersive soundscapes, very realistic characters, and the stories are so varied, like that you can find anything: second chance romances, adventurous vacation flings, hot and heavy hookups. And we all know the fantasy smut genre is becoming very popular these days. They've got a growing library of fantasy series with vampires, Greek gods, fairies, all to help you explore what brings you excitement. I really think Dipsea is just worth trying. You might be very surprised by how much it turns you on and gets you excited. And with their free 30-day trial, there's really no reason not to give it a shot. So for listeners of the show, Dipsea is offering an extended 30-day free trial when you go to dipseastories.com/pillow. That's 30 days of full access for free when you go to dipseastories.com/pillow. That's dipseastories.com/pillow. And let's tell you a little bit more about Babbel. Did you know that 1 in 5 Americans have learn a new language on their bucket list? So if that's one of your goals for 2024, let's make this the year you finally check it off the list with Babbel. We're so excited to tell you about Babbel because prior to Babbel becoming a podcast sponsor, Xander and I signed up for it on our own. Like, we had no idea they were going to become a Pillow Talks podcast sponsor, but we both wanted to get much better at Spanish. And we did all this research, looking into all the apps. We asked our Instagram community, like, what's your top recommendations? And by far and away, Babbel was the most recommended app. So we signed up for it. We paid for it with our own money, and we've been using it and absolutely loving it. So we just feel really excited and grateful that we get to share them as a podcast sponsor. Babbel's quick 10-minute lessons are designed by over 150 language experts to help you start speaking a new language in as little as 3 weeks. Their tips and tools are approachable, accessible, rooted in real-life situations, and delivered with conversation-based teaching, so you're ready to practice what you've learned in the real world. Studies from Yale, Michigan State University, and others continue to prove that Babbel is better. One study even found that using Babbel for 15 hours is equivalent to a full semester in college. And this is the perfect time to give it a shot because we have a special limited time deal for our listeners. Right now, you can get 55% off your Babbel subscription, but only for our listeners at babbel.com/pillow. Get 55% off at babbel.com/pillow. That's spelled BABBEL.com/pillow. Rules and restrictions may apply. So let's talk about how we picked a therapist. So once I very clearly heard the request, I did feel a little bit guilty. So I was like, okay, you know what? I'm going to take it upon myself to do some of the legwork behind it because I knew how annoying it is to try to find a therapist. And I also knew some things to look for. So what I did is I just went straight to Psychology Today. And this isn't a sponsored thing. We don't get any money from them whatsoever. And also, Psychology Today isn't the one and only, therapist profile. But it's pretty convenient. And here in Santa Barbara, most therapists are on it. So what I like about Psychology Today is it's just a directory for therapists. And so you get to see all these profiles of their names, their pictures, their specialties. Now they're doing little videos, like a little 15-second video.
The videos are funny because
they're so funny.
It's kind of genius, but also weird because what they did is they picked a very arbitrary number of a maximum number of seconds the video can be.
15 seconds or 20.
I was going to say it was 7 to 15.
It's really
awkward,
short.
It's awkwardly short. However, I think they made a really good decision to do that because if they didn't set a minimum, you would get
oh my god,
you could get people
10,
talking for
minutes.
God knows how long, and that would get super weird as well. So I really do appreciate them for being do something on video just so that people can kind of make a split-second judgment about you, because honestly that is what people do when you meet someone. You make so many split-second judgments or decisions about them. It's you can't stop yourself from doing that. So you might as well just get to do that on the video. But, it's kind of like they ripped the Band-Aid off. All right, yeah, do the awkward thing. Say a couple sentences and then you're done.
So I knew that I wanted a male therapist because all my other previous experiences were female therapists. And I was like, you know what? Let's just shake things up. Let's do a male therapist. And I looked for therapists who had specific experience in the topic that we were talking about. This will be a quick little plug for therapists out there. Put your freaking specialties on your website. People want to see it. Too many therapists are very afraid to they're like, oh, I do anxiety and depression and life changes and family issues and suicidality and addiction and abuse. And it's just no, just say the thing that you love working with people on and your people will find you. Anyways.
And also probably other people will find you anyway because people are just looking for therapists.
That's my little rant. But I put the filters on for that. And then I just looked through pages and pages of options. And my advice for people looking for a therapist is this is a time to just go with your snap judgments. This is not like, you don't need to be fair. There doesn't need to be a reason why you think yes or no to someone. Like, I really believe that your gut and your instinct will help you find the right therapist for you. So if you're looking at a profile, even if you're just looking at the picture, and I know that sounds shallow or superficial, but if you're looking at this picture of a potential therapist and you just find yourself feeling like, no, like, I don't know why, or maybe I even feel bad for having such a strong no, but like, if you're a no, honor that. Listen to that. It can be off the picture. It can be off their weird little 15-second video. It can be off the way that they describe the way that they work. Like, it's okay. And you really, like, just let yourself make that snap judgment, because your intuition, your instinct will guide you. So you just want to look for somebody who feels like welcoming to you, that you could picture yourself talking about your life with, that you could picture really listening to you. So when I went through the listings with those characteristics, I was very like, no, 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 maybe, no, 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 maybe, no, 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 no. And I think I ended up whittling it down to like, I think I got like 5 or 6 maybes. And then I looked at those a little bit more closely, and I narrowed it down to 3 that felt like solid yeses. So at that point, I brought those 3 to Xander.
Wait, real quick though. You mentioned psychology today is a great place to start for people. People always ask us all the time, like, okay, well, but like, what about if I'm looking for a sex therapist? So if you are specifically looking for someone to talk about sex with, what do you have one place that you typically send people?
That's harder. The only resource that I send people to is ASECT. They have
how do you spell ASECT?
AASECT. That's really
of course.
That's the only directory. But I will say, like, I'm not an ASECT certified sex therapist. Most sex therapists are not ASECT certified. So sex therapy is not nearly as organized or as evolved as psychotherapy is. So it's a lot harder to find sex therapists, but that's a good central directory.
And also with sex therapists, like lots of people call themselves sex therapists. So if you want to be sure that you're seeing a psychotherapist who specializes in sex therapy, make sure you are searching for sex therapy, and then on their website, see that they are actually licensed as a psychotherapist, because that is not guaranteed.
Yeah. So you're looking for like marriage and family therapist, couples therapist, like it's different names based on different states, but you really want somebody who has that foundation in psychotherapy. Okay, so I brought 3 different options to Xander,
which was awesome. Like, it felt, I just want to say, it felt really good to like, because I was surprised that you took that upon yourself. You didn't tell me in advance that you were doing that. And what had actually happened, to be totally honest with you, I think that we had that kind of final discussion of like, where I just said, yeah, I do really want to do this. We had that final discussion, like, I want to say a number of months ago. And it was right before a bunch of just life shit got in the way. Like, Vanessa got COVID. I guess I got COVID.
It was a
tumultuous couple of months. And I think that we had set, like, when we had that conversation where I said, I want to do therapy, I said, let's wait until until this stuff settles down, until we're back in our house. It's like too much to try to do this right now. And so that amount of time that it took to get back into our house ended up stretching out a little longer than we anticipated. And so I was just starting to be like, oh yeah, this is like maybe a little awkward, because it's like been a while. It's been a while since we had that conversation. We haven't talked about it yet, like, for good reason, because like we said we weren't going to talk about it. But now I don't know. And then Vanessa just came to me one day and was like, oh, I did all this pre-work for us. And it felt really good. I'm so appreciative of that. Because even though, yeah, it was a situation where it was something that I was wanting for a while, I can also acknowledge I didn't clearly state my want or my need, for a while. And, it's not fair to be tiptoeing around something and expect your partner to read your mind, or expect your partner to be like, oh, well, they've said this maybe thing a number of times, so like 10 maybes must mean yes.
Yeah. Okay, so we had our 3, and we decided to do consultations with all 3 of them. This is another one of my like weird little pet peeves about this. Like, consultations, on the one hand, it's like, it is nice as a client to just be able to like have a quick phone call and kind of suss out the vibe.
This is usually like 10 to 15 minutes.
Yeah, but at the same time, it's like your therapist cannot and should not really get into like, oh, well, like, let's talk about this some more. Like, they might ask you a little bit about, hey, what are you wanting to work on in therapy? But they shouldn't be getting into the therapy. And I also just like, as a therapist, that time is tough. Like, doing a lot of free consultations is tough, but I'll save that for I'll do this my therapy rant episode a different time. But anyways, all 3 that we were looking at did offer free consultations. So we set up one with the first guy and we talked to him over the phone, and it was just like an instant yes. Like, the connection was there. We hit it off. We liked him. It was just like, yeah. So we decided not to actually interview the other 2.
Yeah.
We just went ahead with him.
Yeah, which was really nice. I think that, I mean, Vanessa, you already said it. Like, go with your gut. But
go with your gut.
That's something that we've really learned throughout the course of our relationship in marriage is you can like painstakingly go back and forth on any decision that you want to make. I know I've been there plenty in my life where it's like, I know what I want, but I'm like, oh, well, I still need to exhaust all the other options before I make this decision, even though I already know this is the thing I want. And really all I'm doing is just making a case for me to decide to do the thing that I know I already want. So we have gotten so much better at being like, yeah, this, like, okay, we both want this. Okay, like, let's do it. And that's helped us when it's come to like buying homes, when it's come to buying cars, when it's come to choosing where we go on vacation, all kinds of stuff. That's just another general life tip. Like, if you can just cut out like all of that decision making, all that back and forth, because you already know what you want, like, fuck it, just do it.
Listen to your gut.
Listen to your gut. You're going to be so much happier. You're going to have so much more time and just peace in your mind.
Yeah. And again, like, I know all the logistical annoyances of like finding a therapist and like, oh, what if you talk to somebody and you set up the appointment and then you don't like them and then you have to go back to the drawing board? Like, it is annoying, but do not settle. Like, you have to like your therapist.
Yeah.
You have to connect with them. Therapy will not work. It will not be beneficial unless you like your therapist. So
yeah, I mean,
don't
you'll just
settle.
Yeah, otherwise you'll like find yourself in the middle of a session being like, oh, like, I don't know if I really want to share this detail with this person because, like, I don't know, like, they don't make me feel safe or whatever. Or you'll find yourself thinking like, oh God, I don't know if I really like what they said. Like, should I trust this person?
Yeah.
And then it's like, then you're just throwing money away.
Like, one thing that made me realize I really like our therapist is he teases us. Like, he kind of gives us a hard time sometimes. Like, our sessions, there's a lot of like joking and laughing, and yeah, and like very quickly, I think he felt a level of comfort with us where he's sort of like, like gently and in a sweet way, like teasing us a little bit. And for another person, they might be like, fuck no, I don't want my therapist teasing me. Are you kidding me? Like, that's not my vibe. That I don't like that. But for us, it really works. And it just like made, it's like, yeah, this is our guy.
He gets me.
Okay, well, I'm kind of jumping the gun, but let's talk a little bit about how therapy's going. How's therapy going for you?
It's great.
I love it.
It's great. And it's been hard, and it's been emotional, and it's been vulnerable.
It for sure got deeper. We knew it was going to get deeper.
It's gotten deeper.
We were talking about stuff that I was like, how are we talking about this?
Yeah, we've each cried a number of times, sometimes alone, sometimes together.
But it's been really enjoyable. I think that's the main takeaway that I want people to get from this episode. When you go to therapy, when things are in a good place in your relationship,
oh my God,
therapy is fun, y'all.
Yeah.
Therapy is so fun. It's like, it's very enjoyable versus when you go to therapy, when you're on the verge of a breakup or something horrible has happened, like, it's so much harder. It feels like so much more of a slog. And I've experienced that on the other end too. Like, as a therapist, when I had clients coming to me when things were in a good place, it was such a joy to work with them. So I think go now. Don't wait until things are bad.
Also, I think an underrated thing about going when you're in a good place is that, like, you might be thinking like, oh, well, if we're going in a good place, like, it's just going to be like all, smiles and roses. Candy canes and lollipops.
Sunshine
and rainbows. Oh my God. Sunshine and I pulled a Vanessa here and like
candy canes and lollipops. Wow.
I feel like that might actually be a phrase, but you're like, it's all going to be sunshine and rainbows. But like I said, like for us, there has been, there's been times when it's been really vulnerable. It's been sad. It's been we've cried. There's been a lot of emotions that come up. And I think that this is actually like one of the very best ways to get more emotionally in tune and to get more comfortable feeling all kinds of things. Because it's like, yeah, we're on the same team. We come out of these sessions loving each other, feeling really good about being on the same team. Like, this is how you learn that having tough feelings is okay. Like, for me, this is how I have really become so much more okay with being sad, being angry, being, dealing with challenging emotions. It's like you put yourself in a controlled environment where, you have someone that knows how to guide you through those feelings. And like, you're with someone that's really important to you, that you really love. And like, you come out of that feeling stronger and, feeling very together and understood and seen and validated. And like, this is how you create that positive association. Because for so long for me, it was just like, whenever you're having a challenging emotion, all you want is for it to go away. Push that motherfucker away. Like, I don't want that thing. And what I've learned through a lot of experiences like this is that it's like, no, I want those things to come closer. Like, yeah, like I want to feel that. I want to feel that because that's actually, we're going to get through it, and we're going to get through it closer together. And it's like, it's not something that I enjoy or like I relish, but it's like, oh, this is actually an opportunity. Like, my brain knows now, like, there can be a positive that comes out of this.
One thing that I've really appreciated is that having a therapist has really taken a lot of the mental load away too. Like, there's just this way that when you're in therapy, like, a part of you gets to relax and say, like, you're the one in charge here.
Yeah, you're ask me the
questions. You're guiding us. Like, you're stopping in certain places and all of that. And it's just like, yeah, you get to kind of relax. And obviously you're still doing work. You're still, there. But there's this way that you don't have to think about like, well, but when do we talk about it? And how do we talk about it? And what do I say? And what if my partner freaks out? And, it's just like, there's somebody there guiding you through it. And that's such a relief to feel that too. And like, he's asked really interesting questions. Like we already said, like, we've been talking about stuff that I'm sort of like, wait, how did we get here? But I'm so glad that we're talking about this. I think we've both said things out loud that the other person was like, wait, what? You think that? You feel that? That's been your experience? But like, in a really beautiful way. I think like, being together for 16 years, you get to a point where you sort of feel like you know everything about your partner.
You don't.
And it's a joy and an honor to see new things, new sides of you, to learn new things about you.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I've left every single session just feeling so much closer to you and so much more in love with you.
Yeah, I've left every session feeling really grateful that we're doing that.
Yeah. And
I think we've also learned, just continue to learn new ways to better communicate with each other. It's like, we thought that we were pretty good at communicating, and you mentioned some of the challenges that we have with communication of like, over therapizing almost, or kind
of going in circles.
Yeah, going in circles. And I have a better understanding now for some of the reasons why we are going in circles. And I have a couple big takeaways, some big, big things I've learned about like, okay, like here's why I've been doing that. And I understand why. I have empathy, understanding for myself for why that's been the way I've done things. And I can see that there are some different ways that could be more effective, even though they feel a little scary.
And we've also we've already put these new tools to use. I mean, we've only had, 3 or 4 sessions? Like, we're still in the early stages of it. 4. Yeah, but we're already putting, new tools to use. Like, we had a little conversation the other day where I tried out something new, and it was like, oh, this is so much better. Yeah. Like, we can both do this. So yeah, the overall experience so far has been really amazing. And I'm sure, there are going to be other challenging sessions. It's always, can be a bit of a roller coaster, the journey. But I think having started it, being in a good place and having found the right person, it's just, and the commitment that you and I have to showing up and just being there with each other and being real and vulnerable and honest with each other has really made it a special experience.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing is that obviously therapy is an expense, and obviously it's it might be a really challenging expense. For a lot of people, for most people, it might be really challenging for you. And it might be like, or it could just be like, God, like this money could be so much better spent on other things. And that's a totally normal way to feel up front. I think every time we've gone to therapy, it's like after you start coming out of those sessions and feeling these things that we were just describing, it's like I have that awe. I'm like, oh, like, yeah, like I can't put a price on what this feels like.
Yeah.
Like this feels like, you know, I'd be willing to pay like many times more than what we're paying for the outcome, for that feeling of togetherness, of like unstoppableness. That's not really a word, but unstoppableness. Just that feeling of love and like understanding and validation. It's so good. And it's hard to describe like what that is. And it's kind of, you know, the challenge of the world we're in of therapy or self-help or whatever. It can be really hard to convince someone to invest in the thing that we know they need, that we know is going to be so good for them.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that, you know, we have hundreds and thousands of messages of people being like, I thought this was crazy. I thought I didn't need it. I did it. And oh my God, it was like the best money I ever spent.
All right, let's wrap this up with how to ask your partner to go to therapy. So we've got some specific steps we're going to walk you through. So the first tip is to immediately disarm your partner by telling them you feel vulnerable.
Yeah, like before you ask for anything.
Yeah, when you go to them, say like, hey, I feel really vulnerable saying this, but I want to say it anyway, something like that. Just that phrase can really help your partner not go on the defensive.
Yeah, because otherwise they're going to take whatever you say and then they are going to interpret some tone or energy, or, you know, they're going to make an assumption about what the backstory is for you.
Yeah.
So this is getting ahead of that and being like, hey, I'm feeling vulnerable.
Yeah.
I said vulnerable. I'm feeling vulnerable about this. Like, you're telling them how you feel rather than letting them assume how you feel.
The next tip is to say something positive about your partner or your relationship. Again, this is just disarming your partner, setting them at ease, and also setting you at ease too, because you're probably going to feel a little nervous having this conversation. So just, even if it's something simple like, I love you, I love our relationship, I care about us, like that can just go a long way.
Yep, compliments and gratitude.
Next, our recommendation is to just come right out and say that you want to go to therapy.
Yeah, don't do what I did.
Just say, I want to go. State your reasons for wanting to go and state these in I language. Like, focus on yourself. I want to learn this. I want to explore this. I want more support with this.
Yeah, as opposed to being like, we need to go.
Another option here is that you can use this episode as a really simple way to ask your partner. So you can say something like, hey, you know, I just heard Vanessa and Xander's latest podcast episode and they revealed that they are in therapy, and just listening to them talk about it, they're having this amazing experience with it. It got me thinking that maybe this could be something really beneficial for us too.
So if you are listening to this podcast episode because your partner asked you to listen to it, they want you to go to therapy with them. Joke's on you. No, I'm totally just kidding. There could be all kinds of reasons why your partner asked you to listen to this. Wow. I'm not trying to be presumptuous.
No, I really
that was mostly a joke, everyone. Mostly a joke. But who knows? This is when you turn to your partner and go, so, want to do this?
No, I do think this can be a really great conversation opener because, like, let's be real, asking your partner to go to therapy, like, that's a hard thing to do. We struggled with it ourselves. So being able to present it in this context, like, it can feel a lot easier to say, like, oh, I was just thinking about it because I heard this episode, instead of like, I've been thinking for a really long time that I want us to go to therapy. It's just like, you're like, oh yeah, it popped into my head. And you can kind of use this episode to preemptively address any hesitations you think your partner might have. Like, you could say, like, you know, oh, Vanessa and Xander didn't go because anything's wrong with their relationship. They just wanted some extra support talking about something. Or, you know, they talked about the expense of it, but they ultimately said they would pay multiple times. You know, it's like use whatever we talked about to kind of preemptively address things that your partner might bring up. So next, we encourage you to talk about the positive benefits that you anticipate therapy having. This time, we want you to talk about your partner. So when we are talking about your reasons for wanting to go to therapy, you're using I language. But when we're talking about the benefits, I think it can be more powerful to focus on the benefits for your partner. So for example, something like, I think it will make fights feel less intense. Or like, I think the way that I make requests of you isn't really very effective. And I want to find some new tools that will make it feel better to you. Or even like, I think it will bring us closer together. So like, it'll be easier for you. You won't have to deal with this. It won't be as intense. Like really focusing and helping your partner see the benefits that it could have for them.
And I think one of the really nice things, like, for, that example you gave of like, I think the way that I make requests of you isn't working and I want to find some new tools. Like, that's also you taking some responsibility for the situation, which is going to go a super long way, because I think that especially if you are asking a man to go to therapy with you, there's going to be some gut reactions going on, and there's going to be potentially a worry of like, oh, are you saying that I'm the problem?
Yeah.
Like, you're good, but I need to change.
I need to go to therapy to fix
we
myself.
need to go to therapy in order for like me to get better.
Yeah. Exactly.
And even if you think that that is the case, why you want your partner to go to therapy with you, I can promise you both need to change. Mm-hmm. And you're going to have a way better experience in therapy if you come open to the idea that both of you are definitely going to need to both make changes and both take responsibility for things. So the sooner you can start thinking of what's my part in this, like what is something that I am willing to change or I'm open to change, and can I find a way to describe that to my partner so that it's clear to them that it's not like, oh, like you have to go to like remedial school or whatever to fix this thing that you screwed up. Like, no, like we're doing this together, and like, here's something that like I want to get better at and how that's going to help you.
Yeah, that'll go such a long way. Our next tip is to make sure you're talking about therapy in a positive way. So I think sometimes people get so anxious about making this request, or maybe they're dealing with some hesitance or resistance themselves. And we sort of talk about like, oh, I know it's going to be such a pain in the ass, or I know it's going to be so expensive, or it's going to take so much time.
No, I think we just need to go to therapy.
Don't do that. You need to talk about it in a positive way. You need to make your partner want to go, like see the benefits of going. And I think even saying, like even getting as specific as saying that you want to go versus you need to go. That is a very powerful way to phrase a request.
Yeah, and also because like that we need to go is kind of tricky. It's like on the one hand, it's like you could be saying like, I need this in order for this relationship to work, but it also could be interpreted as like, as
you
it's
need
like
to go.
as like something but like it could be something like externally is like problematic and like, oh, like I need to go in order to fix this. It's not like, it could be interpreted as I don't want to go, but I need to because this is problematic. And that opens the door for your partner to then come in with those arguments of, oh, well, like, but I think we could fix this.
Yeah.
So it's like, if you just say, I want to go, your partner can't convince you about why you don't need
don't
to
want
go.
to.
Yeah. They're not going to be like, no, you don't want to. I mean, if they say that's a huge red flag, maybe.
Yes.
You should consider finding a different partner. But yeah, they can't argue with what you want to do. They can certainly argue with what you think you need to do.
Yeah. Next, we want you to phrase it as a favor. So you can just say to your partner, like, it would mean a lot to me if you would say yes, even if you don't want to, or even if you don't think we need to. This kind of loops in with our next tip, which is to accept the yes, even if it's a begrudging one.
Oh, yeah.
So here's the thing. It's like, I think a lot of people, it's like, I want to go to therapy and I want my partner to want to go to therapy too. Like you want them to feel as positively about it, as excited about it as you might be, but your partner might not be there. So if you phrase it to them as like, look, you don't need to be excited. You don't need to feel like we need to, but I would love for us to do this for me. Like, would you do this for me?
And I know if you're hearing that, that might feel really hard to you to be like, oh, my partner probably is going to give me a begrudging yes. And God, that's going to feel really challenging for me because I really want to do this. And like they seem like kind of 50-50 on it. I get that feels challenging, but I want to reframe this for you. And actually, we just had Emily Nagoski on an IG Live recently, and she was talking about this. And it was such a powerful concept that like I know this like logically, but I didn't really ever think about it in this context around decision making, where if you want something, you've probably been thinking about it for a while. You've had a lot of time to make a decision, or like once you've sort of come to accept the fact that, oh, this is what we need, this is what I want. You've taken a lot of time mulling things over. You probably, with this therapy thing, if you want to go to therapy, you probably thought you've been through all the permutations that Vanessa talked about. Of like, oh, maybe we do, maybe we don't, maybe we can fix it on our own, maybe we can try this. I'll try this, I'll try that, I'll research this, and eventually you get to, yeah, no, I really want to go. Like I think we need it. I want to go. And your partner has not had that amount of time. And as much as you might think, well, I'm going to give a really compelling logical case, I'm going to shorten the process for them. I don't need them to go through all that, all that whatever, like stress that I went through of going back and forth on it. Like I'm doing them a solid by laying out this really clear case and getting them to that yes really quick so they don't have to suffer the way that I did. Yeah, that makes sense logically, but the reality is like they need that time. Like you need that time to like almost get to acceptance of this is what is happening. Yeah. And that never happens immediately. Like acceptance is not something that you can just boom, have. Like you have to sit with it. And so they haven't had that time. You've given them like the length of the conversation or really less than that, because you probably started the conversation not immediately saying, this is what I want. So like, just give them some time. They are going to give a less than thrilled response.
Yeah. And ultimately, like they don't have to want to go to therapy. They don't have to be excited about it. They just have to agree to it.
Yeah.
And that's fine.
Yeah. And like we were saying, probably by the time you start and they start to see like, oh, this isn't the way I thought it was going to be, or, oh, I am seeing these tangible benefits, like their mind will change about that.
Yeah. And our final tip is to thank them. So let's wrap this up with me saying, thanks, babe, for going to therapy with me.
Yeah. Thank you. It's been really great. And I'm looking forward to every Tuesday when we go.
All right. Well, thank you so much for tuning in today. We're so appreciative that you're here. And we wanted to ask a small favor in return for us being so vulnerable and sharing so much in this episode. We would be very grateful if you took a moment to follow, rate, and review the podcast wherever you listen to it. So whether that's Spotify, Apple, Google, anything else, like a follow, a rating, a review, all those things are so helpful in Pillow Talks being able to grow and reach new couples. So we'd really appreciate it if you could just take a quick second to do that.
All right, and that's it for today's episode of Pillow Talks. Thank you so much for listening. Join us again next week when we talk about all the secret things your partner wishes you would stop doing in the bedroom.